Okay, let's unpack this. We're stepping into, well, a massive cinematic. It's focused intensely on demonic possession, things that go bump in the night, and somehow it's pulled in billion globally.
Billion.
We're talking, of course, about the Conjuring Universe. And when you look at the whole thing, you know, the main Warren films, Annabelle, The Nun, all these different spin-offs, it's a lot.
It really is.
The sheer volume of interconnected lore, it's kind of intimidating, right? Keeping track of all the recurring horror tricks, the emotional stakes across different directors, it's a challenge.
It's a huge enterprise, definitely.
Yeah.
And for anyone trying to sort of get their head around it, the key thing to understand is that this isn't just like a random collection of spooky stories.
No.
The critical analysis we've looked at, it really shows this meticulously crafted, well, they call it an architecture of fear. There are clear recurring strategies they use to keep you hooked, keep you terrified. And that works whether the story's set in 1970s London or 1950s Romania.
So our deep dive today, it's pulling directly from a lot of post-viewing discussions, critical takes, even some production. We're trying to get beyond just what happened.
Yeah, more the why.
Exactly. Why certain moments hit so hard, why they felt uniquely terrifying or, emotional resonant, and how these spin-offs, sometimes unevenly, managed to actually deepen the whole mythology.
Precisely. So our mission for you listening in is to really distill those key insights. How does this huge universe actually work consistently? We're going to be analyzing the power of that central relationship, looking at the technical execution, how they build that systemic dread, and tracking that generational aspect, the passing of the torch.
And if we really want to understand the fear, I think we absolutely have to start at the emotional center, because without that foundation, the whole thing crumbles.
It does.
Let's talk Ed and Lorraine Warren. A really recurring insight from all the sources is they're not just investigators, right? They're almost like the audience's emotional security blanket.
Oh, absolutely.
If their bond is threatened, suddenly the whole universe feels like it's in genuine jeopardy.
That dynamic is the absolute non-negotiable foundation. It's the consensus among critics, really. Their relationship, Ed and Lorraine's, it's the essential heart of the whole franchise.
Yeah.
You feel that genuine chemistry, their devotion to each other, that mutual respect. It acts as your main comfort zone against all the supernatural chaos they're facing.
And it's so different from typical horror, where you often get, marital problems or one partner who's super skeptical.
Exactly. That's a key point. The Warrens offer something radically different. This unconditional partnership right in the face of, absolute evil.
I totally agree it's the anchor. But did any of the critiques maybe suggest that focusing so much on their perfection, their devotion, maybe sometimes undercuts the horror a bit? Like, if they're always so solid, are they just predictable saviors?
That's a really interesting question. And yeah, the sources do tackle that. The argument tends to be that the predictability is actually kind of the point.
Oh.
Their stability is the necessary counterbalance to the unpredictable, chaotic evil they're up against. That devotion gives you, the audience, permission to be completely terrified because someone reliable is going to fight back.
Right.
Even if that fight comes at a huge personal cost. So it's sort of a subversion of the genre, establishing safety through their love, not through undermining it with skepticism.
And you see that love, it's not just words, it's constant action. Ed isn't just saying, I support you. He's physically putting himself on the line.
Constantly.
In ways that go way beyond, just being a supportive husband. He's the one crawling into the creepy cellar, or, and this is critical, performing that unsanctioned exorcism in the first Conjuring. Because he knows Lorraine, the family, they're out of time, and the church hasn't signed off yet.
Yeah, his role is that physical protector, the one who implements Lorraine's insight. It's vital.
Yeah.
The sources really highlight how his actions just speak so much louder than any dialogue could. He doesn't just believe her past. He builds the protections around the house. He fixes the actual physical stuff the evil tries to mess with, and he physically steps in when Lorraine is psychically overwhelmed.
And that level of support, it feels absolutely non-negotiable, because Lorraine's gift, her ability, it takes such a severe toll on her.
Oh, absolutely. She's carrying this immense weight, seeing the absolute worst spiritual terrors you can imagine. And that trauma, it has lasting consequences.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Think about that detail we get, even in the first film. We learn that after seeing something particularly horrific during an earlier exorcism, the Frenchy one, we later find out she had to completely retreat.
Right. The 8 days.
Locked herself away, didn't speak, didn't eat for 8 full days. That's a profound psychological burden. Now, layer on top of that the constant, palpable fear of losing Ed in every single case. Suddenly, every haunting isn't just about the ghost. It feels incredibly personal, incredibly high stakes.
So the tension isn't just, will they survive this haunt?
No, it's, will this finally break Lorraine? Or will she lose the one person who actually grounds her in the middle of all this?
And the power of that emotional investment, it becomes super clear when you look at where the universe, kind of stumbled initially.
Right.
You see what happens when that strong personal connection is missed. And that takes us straight to the first Annabelle movie back in 2014.
Ah, yes. That film, I mean, it did well financially and it had some decent jump scares, sure, but it was widely noted for having this critical deficiency.
Mm-hmm.
It relied on what commentators called an easy shortcut to get empathy from the audience.
The baby.
The defenseless, vulnerable baby. Instead of really investing time in building a deep, complex relationship between the parents, Mia and John, the main reason you cared was just the threat to the infant.
And the analysis often points out that relying on that shortcut, it kind of cheapened the whole experience because the real horror in the main Conjuring films is rooted in that Ed and Lorraine relation, the risk of that bond being broke. In Annabelle 2014, even though the husband, John, was supportive, he was gone a lot, leaving Mia isolated and vulnerable. That lack of a really deep, tested connection just meant the film struggled to carry the emotional weight of real tragedy, even with the scare.
It's a perfect contrast, really.
Yeah.
If you don't genuinely care about the adult characters facing the horror, then the spectacular scares just become, visual noise.
Yeah.
That emotional architecture needs that human anchor. It just confirms that the Warrens aren't just characters. They're like a necessary ingredient in the formula for the franchise's emotional power.
Speaking of architecture and maybe formula, when you look at how the main films land those scares, it often comes down to the mastery of the camera itself, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
James Wan's technical blueprint really feels like the mechanism that translates that emotional threat into physical terror. Let's maybe shift into crafting cinematic terror.
Yeah, the camera work is often talked about almost like it's a character in itself. These films, especially the main ones, rarely just rely on static, locked-off shots for horror. That's the key technical difference.
Right.
They use extensive moving, dynamic camera. It keeps you, the audience, feeling kind of disoriented, perpetually tense, even when they're in wide open spaces. It forces your eyes to scan the frame. You're participating in the search for the threat.
And the single most impressive technique, the one that gets mentioned constantly in the analysis, it has to be that iconic tracking shot, especially in the first two Conjuring films.
Oh, those long, continuous one-take shots. They are pure genius for a couple of reasons. First, they serve this really vital narrative function. They established the layout of the house early on.
You learn the geography.
Exactly. The camera follows characters through multiple rooms, around corners, up the stairs. It lets you mentally map out the danger zone. So later, when the lights go out or a character is isolated,
you know where the creepy closet is.
You know exactly where the terror is probably lurking. That dark cellar door, the long hallway, that specific closet they showed you earlier. The camera is literally mapping out the topography of fear for you.
That's a great way to put it.
And second, the way they execute those shots, often following a kid playing or the family happily moving in it, sets up this powerful emotional contrast. That initial joyous energy gets replaced later by isolation and dread, making the whole space feel violated, tainted.
Yeah.
And in some of the really advanced shots, the camera will even move before the character turns a corner, subtly implying that maybe the presence, the unseen force, is guiding your view. Heightens the tension before the scare even happens.
They also get huge credit, rightly so, for deliberately subverting some classic horror tropes, particularly around when and where the fear is allowed to happen.
Totally. Like, typically, daytime is the quote-unquote safe period in horror stories, right? Time for exposition, maybe some rest, maybe a bit of comic relief.
Right. Sun's up, ghosts are out.
But films like Annabelle 2014, and especially the later prequel, Annabelle, Creation, they expertly create this feeling of isolation and terror during bright daylight hours.
It makes you feel unsafe.
Exactly. Annabelle 2014, for instance, was noted for being one of the visually brightest horror movies, yet Mia felt utterly alone and exposed in her apartment. It emphasizes that the danger isn't just about darkness, it's about the spiritual presence itself.
And crucially, the horror doesn't just stop because someone needs proof. Usually, the ghost conveniently disappears when the skeptic or the police show up.
Right.
But here, the phenomena often escalate.
This is a major structural difference, and it's key. You see it clearly in The Conjuring 2. Vidak's goal there is explicitly to publicly discredit the Warrens. So the haunting doesn't pause for the police or the skeptics or the church liaison. In fact, it often gets worse when they're around. It challenges that rational response, forcing the characters and you, the audience, to accept the immediate supernatural reality, even if the outside world stays skeptical.
And that escalation just feels amplified by the really superior atmosphere and sound design that defines them. Let's talk about the sonic landscape for a second.
Oh, the sound is absolutely key to the tension. I mean, everyone remembers those abrupt, high-volume jump scares in C1 and C2. They're effective shocks.
Yeah, the clap scene.
Right. But the real horror, the dread, is often delivered through the subtle, almost subliminal sound effects. Think about that infamous flooded basement scene in The Conjuring 2.
Oh, yeah. Terrifying.
It's not just the loud bang when the lights go out. It's the constant rhythmic creaking, the groaning sounds, the ominous drip, drip, drip of the water. All these auditory cues build up this sustained psychological discomfort long before the visual payoff hits.
That's the difference between just a quick shock and actual lasting dread.
Exactly. And visually, the analysis points out how the color grading, the way they treat the color, works to set a very specific emotional mood for each haunting.
It's not accidental.
It's deliberate and highly functional. The Conjuring 1 used those warm, muted, almost sepia tones for the farmhouse. That palette intentionally evoked 1970s horror films.
Yeah.
Created this false sense of safe nostalgia before the terror start. It makes the violation of that warmth feel worse.
Right.
Conversely, The Conjuring 2, set in North London, used a much colder, darker, more desaturated look. Lots of blues and grays. It visually reflects that post-war austerity, the gloominess of the setting. It makes the darkness feel like this external force of hopelessness, not just, the absence of light.
And the nun obviously leans hard into that gothic look.
Totally. Deep Gothic, high contrast, fits that historical religious setting perfectly.
So that strong technical blueprint, it really provided the perfect foundation for the spin-offs, eventually find their footing.
Eventually, yeah.
Transitioning to the Annabelle trilogy, it definitely took a dramatic turn after that shaky first attempt in 2014. Critically, the standout, by pretty wide consensus, seems to be the prequel, Annabelle Creation.
Oh, Creation is widely seen as the film that finally figured out how to sustain that necessary emotional heart for this universe, even without the Warrens physically present.
Yeah.
It really elevated the quality of the spin-offs by focusing heavily on lore, explaining how the demon latched onto the Mullins' profound grief after losing their daughter Bee, and by creating these truly invested, vulnerable characters you cared about.
And the success of the narrative, it came directly from making those characters so uniquely vulnerable, didn't it? They focused so heartbreakingly on Janice, the orphan girl who was already physically vulnerable because of polio.
Right.
The story just hammers home that idea that the devil's method is to exploit existing trauma, loneliness, grief to gain it.
Exactly. Evil targets those who are already down. The sources make it really clear that Janice's polio wasn't just some cheap plot device. It was a narrative strategy. It made her emotional resilience, her fighting spirit, despite her physical limits, a prime target for the demon. He wanted to break her spirit first.
And the mechanism.
Remember the mechanism. The Mullins' parents, just consumed by their loss, they basically gave the demon explicit permission by praying to whatever power would let them see their daughter again.
A desperate plea.
And the demon just seized that opening, that window, to attach itself to the conduit, the doll.
It's that initial mistake, born from love and total desperation, that really validates the haunting that followed. And unlike the first Annabelle, the analysis of Creation praised it for, not pulling any punches when it came to consequence.
That commitment to consequences was absolutely essential. Commentators noted that while the first film kind of chickened out, subverting the expectation that the baby might be harmed, Creation committed fully to the body count.
Yeah, it felt serious.
The deaths of the parents and Janice's ultimately tragic fate. It made the stakes feel genuinely high. And that ending, where Janice is permanently possessed and eventually becomes Annabelle Higgins, leading directly into the 2014 film. It left you with this melancholic, genuinely dark feel. That's the payoff for a successful, bleak horror prequel.
Then the trilogy wrapped up with Annabelle Comes Home, which felt like it shifted gears completely. It traded that deep, tragic lore of Creation for just pure, high-energy spectacle.
Yeah, that film was structurally pretty unique. It basically became a high-energy tour of the artifact room.
Right, the funhouse.
Exactly. Since the doll is quickly contained inside the Warrens' house, the action is entirely restricted to one night of pure, localized chaos.
Yeah.
The central idea is that Annabelle acts like a beacon, or a conduit for the demon Malthus, who's trying to unleash all the other cursed objects.
And needs a soul as payment.
Yeah.
Judy.
Right. So it effectively turned the movie into this haunted funhouse where multiple cursed objects, the mourner's bracelet, the bride dress, ferryman's coins, the hellhound tape, they all get unleashed and have to be recontained by Judy and her babies.
It worked, I think, because the stakes, even though they were contained to the house, felt incredibly personal, centering on Ed and Lorraine's daughter.
Totally. It let the film feel like this high-octane adventure, but still fit within the established lore that Annabelle herself is just a magnetic conduit for stronger evil. And it really cemented the artifact room as the universe's ultimate ticking time.
Which naturally brings us to the other major antagonist and spin-off villain, Velak, the defiled nun.
Ah, Velak.
Let's talk about that sub-franchise. I mean, the visual iconography alone is just terrifying. It's received incredibly high.
Velak's look is universally considered iconic, yeah.
Yeah.
And it represents this uniquely competent, really powerful demon capable of manipulation on a massive long-term scale. It's the ultimate corruption of a visual religious symbol. And we see how strategic Velak is in The Conjuring 2, using trickery like manifesting from a painting. Ed himself drew to target the Warrens' psychological weak spots, trying to isolate them from the church.
One of the fascinating reviews we saw suggested Velak is scary not just because of jump scares, but because it's playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. Its main power seems to be psychological manipulation.
Absolutely. Think about the subtle ways Velak operate. It appears to Lorraine as the crooked man, targeting her fear of losing Ed and Judy. It uses Ed's own artistry against him, manifesting directly from his sketch.
Yeah.
It knows the greatest threat to the Warrens isn't necessarily physical injury, but psychological discredit, isolation, and of course the ultimate long possession of friends.
But the critical commentary, it really suggests the quality of the Nun films themselves was, well, wildly uneven, especially the first one.
That's accurate. The Nun, the 2018 film, was often characterized as more of an adventure horror movie than a pure dread builder.
Right. Felt a bit like an Indiana Jones B-side sometimes.
Kind of. It heavily prioritized explaining Velak's origin, how the demon was trapped in that Romanian abbey and got released when bombs during the war created a breach. It focused on gothic atmosphere over delivering consistent, earned terror.
And it suffered from those telegraphed scares.
Yeah, what the commentators called telegraph scares.
Yeah.
Where you pretty much knew exactly when the monster was going to jump out, and it just lacked the emotional weight compared to the core Conjuring.
However, the sequel, The Nun II from 2020, that was widely seen as a significant upgrade, both in terms of the scares and, crucially, deepening the narrative relevance.
It really was a substantial improvement. The Nun II delivered better, more creative scares, moving beyond just shadows and hallway. That sequence with the demon manifesting through the pages of a moving magazine, that was praised for being original and sustaining tension really well.
Yeah, that was genuine.
And crucially, the sequel deepened Sister Irene's character. It revealed her ancestry, that she's a direct descendant of St. Lucy, the patron saint of sight.
Oh, wow. Okay.
This lineage provides this compelling, powerful spiritual counterforce to the demon. It gives her struggle real narrative significance beyond just being, a brave nun caught up in it.
That detail about the St. Lucy ancestry, that's a perfect example of how the franchise uses specific religious lore to establish higher stakes and power symmetry in the fight against pure.
It totally connects her struggle to this whole history of spiritual warfare. It makes her confrontation with Velak feel earned, not just accidental. And this sub-franchise is absolutely critical because it confirms that tragic lore surrounding Frenchie. Maurice, yeah. The charming French-Canadian guide from the first film, the ultimate long con.
You see it happen.
Precisely.
Yeah.
We see that final heartbreaking moment where Maurice, Frenchie, gets possessed by Velak at the very end of the Nun. It confirms him as the long-term vessel for the...
And that connects everything.
It sets up the horrific exorcism of French, the exact event we see briefly in that documentary footage at the start of The Conjuring. The case that traumatized Lorraine so deeply she had to retreat for those 8 days. So the Nun franchise, looking back, gives that trauma real weight and context.
It's actually a remarkable piece of continuous storytelling when you lay it out like that. Showing the emotional damage the Warrens carry is directly tied to lore planted way back in the spin-offs. And that continuity, that sense of history, it now brings us to the next generation. And the final main chapter, The Conjuring, Last Rite.
Judy Warren. She is clearly positioned as the future of this fight. And the franchise has been carefully setting her up for years.
Yeah, you see it early on.
She's established early, especially in Annabelle Comes Home, as having inherited Lorraine's specific gift, that ability to see and communicate with spirit. But crucially, the sources don't portray her as just a typical helpless horror kid.
No, she's competent.
Highly intelligent, emotionally competent, and as one source perfectly put it, kind of a little badass.
You see that intelligence translate directly into strategic action, too. Remember that scene in Annabelle Comes Home where she's trapped in the artifact room?
Oh, that scene is vital for establishing her developing power. When she's faced with that onslaught of unleashed demons, her strategic thinking kicks in. She cleverly grabs and uses a recording of an exorcism.
Which everyone assumes is the Frenchie tape, right?
The sources universally assume it's the Frenchie tape, yeah. She uses it to fend off the doll and the other spirit. It was a fantastic example of using previously planted lore to show her power isn't just passive sight. She can actively use the Warrens' tools and knowledge to fight back.
And this whole generational theme, it really culminates in The Conjuring. Last Rite, the final main chapter. It dramatically brings those central themes, vulnerability, protection, right to a head. And it's spurred by this deep traumatic backstory we learn about.
Yes, that deep emotional trauma surrounding Judy's near stillbirth. That period Ed called the longest minute of our life. That's the core propellant for the action in the final film.
Yeah.
This event just amplifies Lorraine's fear exponentially. It makes her more fearful, more protective than we've ever seen her. She realizes that fighting this kind of evil is fundamentally different when the target is your own child, the one she nearly lost before the fight even really began.
And that fear drives her to maybe try and limit her gift or shield Judy too much, which makes her vulnerable in a whole new way. It's a huge emotional arc for Lorraine, who's usually so resolute.
It creates this really interesting new level of internal tension. But the film also introduces a new dynamic with Judy's fiancé, Tony. He has to prove his love, essentially, by facing the horror head-on and accepting the family's special nature. It mirrors that sincere partnership of Ed and Lorraine from the first film. Tony's sincerity, his bravery, it becomes his initiation into this family life. It's never going to be normal. He's like the modern version of Ed's unwavering belief.
And the ultimate payoff after this whole 4-film journey for the Warren family, it's that incredible full-circle synergistic moment in the finale of Last Rites.
Oh, it was so profoundly emotionally satisfying because we'd spent the whole film watching Lorraine try to sort of shut out her gift or shield Judy out of fear.
Right.
But in that final confrontation, she makes this conscious choice to let the fear in. She realizes suppressing her power only makes them both weaker. She empowers Judy.
And they fight together,
Leading to this synergistic combined fight against the demon. It felt almost superhero-y in a way. A moment of combined spiritual and physical resistance. It was such a satisfying payoff that acknowledged all the years spent planting seeds for their combined power and trust.
So if we synthesize all these findings, then what's the ultimate takeaway for you on the structure, the architecture of The Conjuring?
I think the universe works best and its longevity really is guaranteed when that emotional core is strong. The scariest threats ultimately aren't just the ghosts or the demons popping out. It's the risk of losing the people you fight for. Whether that's the Warrens' devotion to each other, or the tragic fate of Janice in Creation, or that existential threat to Judy in the later film. That's where the real fear.
Absolutely. The longevity, the effectiveness, it's built on that solid foundation, stellar character chemistry, that unshakable Warren bond, combined with a real commitment to strong visual horror and technical execution that consistently tries to subvert tired old tropes.
And the successful use of deep interconnected lore that continuously deepens the emotion, especially in those Annabelle prequels and that generational shift to Judy, that validates the whole cinematic universe model, really. They made us care deeply about who was fighting, not just what they were fighting.
And that successful combination, it leaves us with a final, maybe provocative thought, especially given the artifact room.
Oh boy.
Containing Annabelle, the Mourner's bracelet, the Hellhound tape, countless other cursed objects.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate untapped source of chaos, entire franchise.
It really is. I mean, if they could spin off an entire successful trilogy from just one doll that's locked behind blessed chapel glass, imagine the explosive narrative potential just sitting there.
Dozens of other cursed objects.
All those items, each one a dormant vessel for some specific malevolent spirit, just sitting in that single room, protected only by, a thin layer of glass and a priest popping in once a month.
It's a literal time bomb of dormant evil, just waiting for one slightly nosy character, maybe another babysitter, to touch the wrong object.
And unleash years of potential cinematic terror in one night. The nightmares practically write themselves.
Indeed they do.